Before country music crowned him as a legend, life handed Vince Gill lessons its own way. Some beautiful, some nearly unbearable, all unforgettable. In every soaring melody and gentle lyric, echoes of a boy's heartbreak and a man's redemption can be traced through his remarkable story. How does someone carry both grief and grace in the same voice? And how does a quiet man, shaped by private sorrow and bold decisions, come to move millions without ever demanding the spotlight? Vince Gill's music has always had a certain softness, a gentleness that pulls at your chest. But that tenderness wasn't just style. It was memory, pain, and hope wrapped in sound. Long before he was a Grammy-winning artist or a beloved icon, he was simply a boy growing up in Norman, Oklahoma, finding comfort in his small 4-string tenor guitar. His childhood was ordinary in the best way. School during the day, family dinners at night, and music filling the spaces between. His father, J. Stanley Gill, was a federal judge with a deep love for music. He didn't just encourage Vince to play. He played alongside him, making music feel like home and bonding through shared chords and melodies. But that peaceful rhythm was shattered when Vince was only 11. A phone call changed everything. His older half-brother, Bob, had been in a serious car accident. For 3 long months, Bob remained in a coma. And when he finally woke up, the person Vince remembered, the brother who once made him laugh and ran with him through open fields, was gone. Bob's injuries left him unable to speak, unable to care for himself, and emotionally distant. It was a loss without a funeral, a mourning that never ended. For young Vince, watching his parents grieve someone who was still physically alive left a scar deeper than most could understand. Especially his mother, who bore the sorrow quietly, day after day, as Bob lived out the rest of his life in that heartbreaking state. Vince carried that weight into adulthood, and Bob's death in 1993 came after 25 years of this silent pain. That same year, Vince released his Christmas album, Let There Be Peace on Earth. But peace was far from his heart. The song It Won't Be the Same This Year came straight from that wound, the ache of remembering someone who never really got to come back. Vince later shared that every time he performs that song, he sees the little boy he once was, still reeling from a loss he couldn't explain. That's the thing about his music. It doesn't just entertain. It confesses, remembers, and reaches out to anyone who has ever felt a similar kind of quiet heartbreak. Through the late 70s and into the 80s, Vince Gill worked hard to make a name in Nashville. He played with Pure Prairie League and gained a solid reputation as both a guitarist and a vocalist. His solo records with RCA, The Things That Matter and The Way Back Home, were praised by critics and admired by fellow musicians. But they didn't sell. For a while, it seemed Vince would remain a talented figure on the edges of country music, respected but not celebrated. Then came a crossroads moment. Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits, a legend in his own right, invited Vince to join the band. It wasn't just a flattering offer. It was an open door to global fame, massive stages, and instant rock star status. Most musicians would have jumped at the chance. But Vince hesitated. He knew that if he accepted, he'd be playing someone else's songs, telling someone else's stories. He hadn't told his own yet. So, in an almost unthinkable move, he said no. He chose to stay in the shadows a little longer, hoping that one day his own voice would be enough. It was a risk that paid off. In 1990, he released When I Call Your Name, and the title track became his breakthrough. It was soft, aching and unforgettable, like a quiet prayer wrapped in melody. The song won him his first Grammy, and suddenly, Vince Gill was no longer on the edge of the spotlight. He was in it, and he'd gotten there without giving up who he was. But while his career blossomed, his personal life was changing in ways he hadn't expected. In December 1993, during a holiday television special, he met Amy Grant. Known as the Queen of Christian Pop, Amy was radiant but seemed under pressure. Vince, noticing her tension, offered a few simple, kind words. "Hey, unknit that brow. It's going to be okay." It wasn't flirtation. It was empathy. But something clicked. Their voices blended during the performance in a way that felt like more than harmony. It felt like fate. At the time, both were married. Vince was with Janice Oliver, a fellow musician from the duo Sweethearts of the Rodeo, and they had a daughter together. Amy was married to singer Gary Chapman. Their marriages were already fraying under the weight of distance, pressure, and emotional strain. Vince and Amy maintained boundaries, respecting their commitments, but the connection between them quietly grew. Over time, their shared performances and conversations turned into something deeper. Rumors started to swirl, especially around Amy, whose public image was tied closely to her faith. When both marriages ended, Vince's in 1997, Amy's in 1999, the backlash was harsh. Amy, especially, faced judgment from Christian fans who felt betrayed. But neither Vince nor Amy saw their love as reckless. They saw it as patient, kind, and hard-earned. In March 2000, they married in a private ceremony at Vince's Nashville home, surrounded by loved ones. It wasn't grand. It was sincere. And it marked the start of a relationship that would prove enduring, weathering trials far greater than public opinion. One of the most unexpected turns in Vince's musical life came years later, after the death of Glenn Frey from the Eagles in 2016. It seemed like the end of an era. Don Henley even suggested the band couldn't go on without Glenn. But then something surprising happened. Vince, who had admired the Eagles since his early days and had covered their songs in tribute shows, received a quiet invitation to join a reformed version of the band alongside Glenn's son, Deacon Frey. For Vince, this wasn't a chance to step into a legend's shoes. It was a chance to honor a legacy. He didn't try to mimic Glenn Frey. He studied the music, honored the harmonies, and let the songs breathe with sincerity. When the Eagles performed with Vince for the first time in 2017, including a massive show at Dodger Stadium, fans responded not with resistance but with tears. Don Henley later said, "He knows how to be in a band." That's high praise from someone who doesn't hand out compliments easily. Vince didn't erase Glenn's memory. He helped preserve it. Off stage, life continued to test him. In 2020, during a routine medical checkup, Amy was diagnosed with a rare heart condition that required open-heart surgery. The pandemic made everything harder. Vince couldn't be by her side during the early days in the hospital. When he finally could, he stayed constantly, supporting her through the pain and recovery. Amy later said that his love helped her heal. But the challenges weren't over. In 2022, she suffered a severe bicycle accident that left her with a traumatic brain injury. She lost consciousness, struggled with memory and balance, and needed months of care. Vince dropped everything to be by her side. "No stage matters more than seeing her well again," he said. For someone who had spent a life in music, love had clearly become the loudest note of all. And still, Vince continues to create. Not chasing charts, but truth. He says the songs he writes now are the best of his life. Not because they're popular, but because they're real. Songs like Forever Changed, inspired by stories of abuse, and When My Amy Prays, a quiet, beautiful confession of love and admiration, show a man who no longer sings just for success, but for healing. Vince Gill's story is not one of overnight fame or glittering perfection. It's a story of scars turned into songs, love earned through patience, and choices that could have led to more fame but instead led to more peace. His voice has always carried something deeper. A sense of lived-in emotion, of gentle strength. He never needed to shout to be heard. He just needed to be honest. In a world full of artists chasing the next big hit, Vince Gill stands quietly apart. Not because he's trying to, but because he's always followed a different rhythm. One that starts not on the charts but in the heart. His songs are not just music. They're memories, lessons, and quiet prayers. Through every loss and every note, Vince Gill invites us to feel something true. If Vince's story or music has ever touched your life, take a moment to share your favorite song in the comments. And if you'd like to keep hearing the untold stories behind music's most unforgettable voices, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.